Hello everyone, and welcome to the Chapter 10 STEM Challenge Overview. Today, in this, we'll be talking about Charles Darwin and the evidence for evolution. Please note that we'd only like you to read and study 10.1 and 10.2. So, in 10.1, we're going to talk about Darwin and the theory of evolution. 10.2, we're going to talk about the evidence for evolution. Also, remember, we'd like you to watch all of the animations that are highlighted within the presentation. Don't worry about 10.3 and 10.4. So Darwin and the theory of evolution. One of the misconceptions people have about Darwin is that he was famous for discovering evolution. And evolution really says two things. It says that life has been here for a long, long, long time, and that life has changed over time. Darwin is famous for his theory of natural selection, where he describes how life changed over time. We knew that life was here for a while because we'd seen the fossils that we started to dig up, and this was all in the 1800s. So let's take a look. One idea is that evolution occurred. In other words, organisms change over time. In Darwin's time, everybody thought the organisms stayed exactly the same way that they were, that they never changed. Well, we know that that's just not true. Look at the flu virus that changes every year. The other idea is that evolution occurs through natural selection, and natural selection is the process by which things with beneficial traits produce more offspring than others. Here is the voyage that Charles Darwin took when he was a young man. It was a 5-year voyage that leaves England, comes down here to the coast of South America, where Darwin would always visit inland. He hated being on the boat, and the purpose of the boat was to map all of these areas, and Darwin collected plants and animals from all over the world in this 5-year voyage. One of the interesting things that he noticed on the Galapagos Islands was that some tortoises, if they were on a very arid island, had this hump behind their head. Whereas if the tortoise was on an island that had lots of vegetation, those tortoises didn't have that. Here are some of Darwin's observations. During this 5-year visit, he visited tropical rainforests and new habitats. He saw many plants and animals that he had never seen before. He experienced an earthquake that lifted the ocean floor 9 feet above sea level. And that's when he figured out why are there fossils of ocean animals high in the mountains? He visited rock ledges that had been on the beaches and built up over time, and he found giant fossils of extinct animals. Here's one here in the bottom right, and here's a marine iguana. Here's another. This was a huge animal that was found extinct in South America. It's called the ground sloth. It took Darwin many, many years. He came back to England in 1836. But here are is the evolution of his theory. You should read through this. One interesting thing down here is that Darwin really didn't publish until 1859, and that's only after a fellow naturalist sent him a letter which described the theory of natural selection. And it's a great story. We'll tell you about that later. Here is a link to a movie about Darwin. The movie's about 2 hours long. I don't want you to watch the whole movie, but what I'd like you to do is just watch the first half hour of this. I think you'll get a sense of Darwin and his time. It also will look at a couple biologists who are working in the Andes right now. This is a good animation on what exactly is evolution from Stated Clearly. Please take a look at that. In the evidence for evolution, we're going to look at how fossils help us understand the past and give us clues about how evolution, and we're also going to look at something called biogeography, how living organisms suit the geography of the land that they're from. This is linked right here. If you click on independent lines of evidence, you're going to go to what is the evidence for evolution, and they're going to study the evolution of whales. Really great, well done. You're also going to hear about and read about structural homologies. Notice that all humans in their arm has 1 bone, 2 bones, wrist bones, finger bones. Notice that a dog, 1 bone, 2 bone, wrist bone, paw bones, 1 bone, 2 bone. That's true of all vertebrates. Here's another example of it with a bat. This is a timeline that we've seen before, and I wanted to bring this back because Darwin had no idea that time was this deep. He had no idea that the Earth was billions and billions of years old. In fact, most of the fossils that Darwin was finding in his time were just up here in these areas, only from about 100 million years ago. The fossil record has gotten better and better since then. But remember, down here is the origin of the Earth, most of this time, simple prokaryotic life in the ocean. Here's a good diagram from your book about the fossil evolution of the horse. And take a look at this, and you'll notice this is 3 million years ago, 7 million years, 25 million years ago, 60 million years ago. The horse was small, much smaller, had 4 toes on the ground. Today, only 1 toe on the ground and much longer teeth. Another example of this is the evolution of the horse diagram from your book. Take a look at this. We have great fossil records also on the evolution of the giraffe and how the vertebrae of the giraffe became elongated over time. Notice this is millions of years ago. This is the fossil record from 25 million years ago up until the present day. Remember that artificial selection is a really important way to think about evolution. Take a look at these 2 horses. Both of these horses are the same species. Why are they so wildly different now? Because human beings have artificially selected the traits that they want. So we can have this really small little toy horse versus a larger workhorse. It's also true for not just horses, but it's true for vegetables and plants and fruits. It's true of corn. This is what ancient corn looked like, and this is modern corn. We've done it with dogs, wolves. All these dogs are the same species. That's why they can interbreed. But a few thousand generations ago, they were all wolves. It's true of bananas. Another slice of evidence for evolution comes from embryology. These are vertebrate embryos, a fish, a reptile, a bird, a human. And at one time, all of us in the embryo had gill slits. Why? Because we all had a common ancestor, and embryologically we all evolved that way. We talked about molecular data before, and notice that this is the number of amino acids that differ from a human to a rhesus monkey. We only differ by about 8 amino acids, but as we diverge more from the organism, the number of amino acids that we have in common goes down. Biogeography is an example of how the environment can change the organisms that would live within that environment. This is a good example from the camel. Make sure you read about that. There was a book out that won the Pulitzer Prize a number of years ago by Jonathan Weiner that studied 2 biologists studying the beak of the finch in the 70s in the Galapagos. And the big thing that they discovered, take a look at this. All finches and their beak size in 1976, a couple years later, it was a really bad drought. Look what happened. The beak size really favored larger beaks because larger beaks gave those birds an advantage over the others, and it passed it on to their children. It's a great example. Read about that in your textbook. Don't worry about what adaptive radiation is, but look at this diagram and understand that adaptive characteristics can help a species evolve and change over time. This is the same link to the evidence for evolution that you should take a look at. Remember, the link is over here. They take evidence from comparative anatomy, embryology and development, the fossil record, DNA comparisons, species distribution. Very, very well done animation. Again, here's the link to the Darwin movie so that you have it. Just watch the first half hour. I'd like you to watch this 10-minute animation, which talks about an experiment with evolution using the Atlantic silverside. One of the things that you'll find interesting is when Darwin was first proposing that all animals evolve from other animals over time, his critics would say to him, hey, what about transition species? Shouldn't there be fossil records where, let's say, the fish slowly turned into an animal with land features? Well, he said, yes, we will find those, but the fossil record is very much incomplete. Well, in the 1920s, this fish was found alive. We thought it was dead. This is a coelacanth, and most fish, actually all vertebrate fish, do not have bones coming into this fin right here. This one does. The coelacanth does. So it's considered a transition species. They live very, very deep, so that's one of the reasons we didn't find them until much, much later. Again, the timeline of life over time. Keep in mind that it's not only outside of plants and animals and vertebrates that changes, but also inside evolves over time. Notice the shark, salamander, lizard, that we get a more sophisticated digestive system over time. The same is true of our brain. Brains evolve. The same is true of circulatory systems. And this is a link to a virtual fossil museum that has just some great images of fossils that have been found over the past 100 years. And the last thing is what happened before human origins. Take a look at this animation as well. Okay, that's it for that quick overview of Chapter 10. Please make sure you read and study. Make sure you go back to the learning page for this on our website. And good luck on the quiz.